the International Futures Forum, Tom has a lot of very, very wise words. So without further ado, Tom.
Thank you very much, Joss. And it's great to be here. Now, all impact is not created equal. And I don't think that we often have very sophisticated conversations about impact. So the first half of this talk is actually going to try and give you just a couple of ways to think about impact, maybe in a different way, before in the second half we're going to get to the kind of those more practical, tactical things that you might want to think about if you are genuinely wanting to get into a career in impact. I run, as Joss says, an organization called Onpurpose. Over the past 12 years, we have helped nearly 1,000 people think about, but also put into action, how they are going to help transform the economy through the work they do. And that's essentially how we think about impact. Impact is about how can we collectively change the economy, very broadly speaking, because the economy is essentially how we all decide to organize ourselves to produce everything that everyone in the world needs to live a good life, and how can we do that within the regenerative capacities of our planet. Now, we at Onpurpose think about this impact in a particular way. We believe that we need to not just kind of make this a little bit better or to make incremental change happen. We think we need a fundamentally different way of organizing our economy in such a way that's so qualitatively different that we may not even be able to envisage what might happen and how we might do things in future, because essentially this economy, this new economy, needs to be based in, needs to be rooted in very different beliefs, very different assumptions, and very different values. If the economy was a laptop, we've gone past the stage where we can just download some patches, put in some kind of virus protection and so on. What we need to do is we need a clean installation of a new operating system, preferably based on a different coding language. And I wish we could just kind of power down the economy, wait for 20 seconds, hit the button, power it up again, and start afresh. But obviously, that's not how it works. So what we need to find a way of doing is how do we upgrade the system when we can't reboot the computer? That, I genuinely believe, is the biggest challenge of our time. And if we don't manage to do that, we are just going to carry on going around the same circles and the same circles as we have been doing for the last decades. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but this week is actually European Mental Health Awareness Week. And it struck me that, if the economy was a human being, wouldn't take us very long to diagnose this kind of economic human being with clinical depression. I was looking up some symptoms. You are typically hopeless, you are probably anxious, you are isolated, you find it difficult to relate to people, you feel constantly guilty, you maybe don't see the point in things, you might be using too much alcohol, too much tobacco, too many drugs. And our economy uses too much oil. Certainly feels guilty about a lot of its history and what it does now as well, and rightly so. It isolates people and dehumanizes people. It doesn't see the point in things, as we see by all the conversations that we have about purpose these days. And maybe most importantly, it has this underlying set of beliefs and assumptions about itself, which are, at very best, scientifically very dubious, but also create these kind of dynamics which are really quite self-destructive and just are not helpful. So one thing, obviously, you can do if you are depressed is you can get some help from a therapist. And a good therapist will help you to examine those beliefs and assumptions that you hold that maybe aren't serving you. They might be things like, we have to grow. Meritocracy is the best way of organizing things. Competition is how progress happens. And profit is what it's all about. And a good therapist will help you think of alternative values or beliefs that you might be able to use instead. Instead of growth, what about sufficiency? Instead of competition, what about collaboration? Instead of meritocracy, what about diversity or representation? Instead of profit, what about purpose? And of course, this is not just about thinking about these new values, it's also about putting it into practice. So a good therapist will help you run some experiments, try out what it feels like if you root yourself in these alternative ways of thinking. And that's happening in our economy all over the place. It's amazing. It's really exciting. We don't always see them because we have to kind of take off our traditional glasses to see these things going on. But let me just tell you about a few companies which I think are really exciting. Here in Paris, there's a clothing retailer called Loom. And in the UK, where I come from, there's a furniture company called Vitsu. Both of those try and sell as little stuff to their customers as possible. That is diametrically opposed to how business normally works. It's rooted in a genuinely different belief about what they are there for. The Swedish bank, Handelsbanken, thinks about itself as a doctor to the financial needs of its customers. They take an oath, like a doctor, to do no harm. They will not cross-sell you any products unless they are convinced that you really need this product and that their product is the best. If it's not, they tell you to go and get it somewhere else. Or another more local company here, a food company called C'est qui le patron, who not only source food for supermarkets locally and they guarantee their producers a fair price, they also, and this is the seemingly mad bit, allow their customers to set the price they pay in the supermarket for this food. These are all things that, according to traditional business ways of thinking, should not be possible. These companies should not be successful, but they are. It is possible. They are experiments. They give us hope that a healthy future actually is possible. So we need therapists, and we need people who've gone through therapy and then will do and work with these experiments. But there are parts of the economy that are also in really bad shape. They are really depressed. And they have, over decades, become reliant on a whole bunch of drugs, essentially, antidepressants, painkillers, you name it, just to get us through the day. And we've developed a whole set of doctors who are incredibly professional, incredibly good at what they do, and really necessary. And they do things like provide homeless shelters, run food banks, do carbon offsetting, trying to stem the extinction of species on our planet. They are dealing with the symptoms of our economic system. You might say, if you're like me, well, I don't really like taking too many drugs. Could we just not do that anymore? I don't think we could. I think we need these doctors. If we just took them out and we went cold turkey, I actually genuinely think the system would collapse before we've had time to go through the therapy. So we need doctors as well. And a third idea that you might be given if you were struggling with depression is that people say, well, why don't you go and do some exercise? Exercise can boost your emotions, it can boost your immune system, it can make you more resilient. And again, we have lots of this going on in our economy. People who are being trainers, people who are doing the exercise in their organizations, they are reducing their carbon footprints. They are thinking about their supply chains, ensuring that, for example, there's no slave labor in there. They might even be putting you through a whole program that they've put together. You might be registering as being organic or fair trade or getting your B Corp certification. They are improving the current system. They are making sure that the current system can still go on as long as possible with the least negative impact that we're going to have. And again, they're probably keeping us off the drugs, which is fantastic, and they're giving us space to do the therapy. So we have the therapy and the therapists who help us envisage a better future and give us the courage to do some experiments to get there. We have the trainers who keep us fit and off the drugs and improve the system as it is. And we have the doctors who help us get through the day. Now, do we need all three of these? I think given the economic, or the status of our economic human being, I think we do. Are they all made or created equal? I don't think they are. I think we have to be honest with ourselves that the real change is really going to come through the therapy. Now, should we all become therapists? Absolutely not. I think that would be a disaster. But do we all need to do some therapy? Yes, I believe we do. If I go and see my doctor or I go and have a training session with a personal trainer, I would like to know that they have maybe gone some therapy through some therapy themselves. I think if they have a vision in the back of their head of where ultimately we're aiming for, and that could be a healthy, genuinely healthy, different economy, I think that's going to help them provide better better training and better drugs to me as well. So I think if we all do this bit of therapy and we all have in the back of our minds where we could be heading and that's an amazing place and that we have the courage to put some expense in place, then actually we are all doing our part. Whatever role we play, we are all doing our part in bringing about this most important transformation of our times. And that's what I think is needed, nothing less. So let me talk a little bit now about the kind of individual track. Some of you might be thinking, or Joss already said, some of you are thinking about trying to get into a career in impact. But I want to use the same framework. What drugs do you need? What training do you need to do? And what therapy might you need to go through? Let's start with the therapy. I think you have a responsibility to be able to articulate what do you think a healthy, wonderful economy looks like that is genuinely different from today. Now you might say, well, that's really difficult, that's completely overwhelming. But actually, there are so many ideas out there that you could go and find out about. Whether that's thinking about the history of our economy and its entanglement with colonialism and slavery to start with, maybe not a bad place. But then thinking about post-growth economics, thinking about donor economics. How do I apply systems thinking to our economy? What about diversity? What about collaboration rather than competition? What about exploring the wisdom of indigenous peoples and ancient religions? There's so much. I think you have a responsibility to put together your version of what that is and show up with optimism and energy and some ideas for how you want to make it happen. That's one level of therapy that you need to do. There is, though, a second very important level of therapy, and that is your individual therapy. We call this the inner work. You need to ask yourself the questions, what beliefs, assumptions, values do I hold that might need to change? You might need to ask yourself things like, what is success for me? What is enough for me? What life do I want to lead, and what responsibilities do I have that I need to include in that? Unless you do this inner therapy, this inner work as well, I think your journey towards impact and hopefully becoming a leader in impact is always going to be somewhat hollow. Secondly, there's some training. I've got 5 exercises for you, which I'm going to run through very quickly. First one, try it out. You are not going to decide this by doing a pros and cons list at your kitchen table. You're going to get out there, talk to people, help out, do a project, volunteer, whatever it is, have some contact with people. This was advice that was given to me when I was leaving management consultancy, and it's very valuable. Second, find your focus. Don't go around saying, I want to get into impact. It's very difficult for someone to help you if that's what you ask them for help with. You need to have something more focused. I want to help 13 to 14-year-olds in my community develop the skills that when they're 25, they're going to get a job, whatever. I don't mind how specific it might be. The paradox is that if you ask me for advice on something very specific, I can give you much more help than if you ask me for advice on something that's very vague. So even though it feels uncomfortable, try and be as focused as you can. Thirdly, grow your support. Not just your network of people who might provide you with a job, that's important too, but grow your support of people who are going to be on this transition with you. This is one of the learnings from our Onpurpose program. The peer support that you get is incredibly valuable. These are the people who are going to help you do your training, get out of your bed on a Saturday morning when it's cold and wet and raining and you don't want to do it. They're going to motivate you, and you need that. Fourth, and I don't like to say this, but I think it is practical to address it, try and, if you possibly can, create some financial flexibility. You might earn less. You might not. You might earn the same. You might earn more. But you might earn less, or you might not earn for certain periods. It might take you a while to figure out what you're going to do, or you might have a false start and then need to take a few months out. And if you can build in a little bit of flexibility in whatever way, that can make your transition a lot less stressful. And lastly, I like this one given to me by a colleague of mine saying, don't forget your loved ones. You might think this is all about my transition, my change, my career. But you changing is going to massively affect those who are around you as well. Don't forget to include them in your training program too. And third, let's talk about the drugs. What do you need to get you through the day, through the week? What floats your boat? Is it coming to something like this? Does this give you energy for the next month? Amazing. Book the next one in 3 months' time. Is it that you need a drink with your friends once a week or an hour with a book by yourself? Put it in the diary. Some of these parts of what you're going to do are going to be difficult. You need to know what you need to get you through the day. But also, be conscious and think about what drugs you might actually already be on that might not be serving you and you may not even realize. Do you engage in a spot of retail therapy? What does that do for your financial flexibility? Are you on social media all the time? Does that inspire you or just kind of make you feel a bit anxious? Does your job keep dangling that kind of that promotion or that salary rise just 6 months ahead of you? Be aware of what the drugs are that you might already be on or being fed. I'm going to make a third point on drugs as well, which is that I see some people who want to change careers and come into this space, and they treat it almost as if it was an antidepressant. They want to come into here because they think it's going to make them happy. And I think it's very important to remember a quote which comes from Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist and concentration camp survivor, who says, the pursuit of happiness is a contradiction in terms. Happiness cannot be pursued, it must ensue. And it is the byproduct of pursuing a challenge or task that is greater than yourself. So in other words, I think you need to come into this space because you want to be in service to something. I hope for you that will create satisfaction and contentment and ultimately maybe happiness, but that is the right way round to think about it. So, review the medication that you're on. Maybe get rid of some, maybe add some. Do the training, and make sure that when you're training, don't just train to get faster at the race you're already running, but train that you can run a different race as well. And third, do the therapy, so that you can articulate for the economy, for your organization, for yourself, what you think a healthy future looks like, and you have some ideas of how you might move in that direction. That might sound simple, but I think those are the ingredients of genuinely transformational impact. And if you start working on that, then I think you might realize that we need good people everywhere. Every organization needs therapists, people who will experiment. They all need trainers, they all need doctors. And maybe you will realize that maybe it's not a career in impact that you're looking for,